Last time, Father Benedikt Scholl told us about October of 1518 at the shrine of St. Vitus in Saverne. The desperate cure had begun to work. Slowly, imperfectly, without pattern or logic. But it had begun. Peter, the 9-year-old boy, had stopped on the 14th day at Saverne, had looked at his mother, and said, "Mama," 1 word, 2 syllables, the most ordinary word in any language. And that morning in Saverne, it was the most beautiful thing Father Benedikt had heard in his entire life. Dancers were stopping, 1 by 1, 2 by 2, sometimes 10 in a single day, sometimes no one for days, without pattern, without explanation, as strangely and inexplicably as the dancing had begun. But not everyone stopped. By the end of October, 38 dancers remained, their bodies damaged, their minds distant, their feet still moving, and among the 38, still dancing on day 101, was Frau Troffea, the first dancer, the woman who had started everything on a July morning with a single step onto the cobblestones of the Rue de Boulangers. But on the evening of October 29th, something was different. Conrad had seen it. Father Benedikt had seen it. Her rhythm was uneven, stuttering. Something was changing. They stood together in the cold October night and watched her. This is episode 4. The final episode. This is how it ended. I stood beside Conrad in the courtyard of the shrine of St. Vitus for a very long time that night. The October air was cold. Our breath came in clouds. The stars above Saverne were bright and hard in the way that October stars always are in Alsace. As if the cold had sharpened them, Frau Troffea moved in the center of the courtyard. But Conrad was right. Something was different. The rhythm that had driven her for 101 days without pause, without rest, without mercy was stuttering, losing its certainty. There were moments, brief, almost imperceptible, when her feet seemed to hesitate before finding the rhythm again, when her arms seemed to resist before the motion continued, like a clock that has been running for months finally beginning to wind down, like something that has burned for a very long time finally running out of fuel. I did not sleep that night. Neither did Conrad. We sat in the courtyard wrapped in cloaks and we watched her. The monks changed their shifts, but Conrad and I did not move. We talked sometimes, quietly, about nothing in particular, about the city, about his daughters, about ordinary things. The way people talk when they are keeping vigil and do not want to name what they are watching for because naming it might make it not happen. At some point in the deep hours of the night, perhaps 2 or 3 in the morning, the other sounds of the shrine faded. The monks moving through corridors. The distant sounds of the remaining dancers from other parts of the courtyard. The wind. Everything went quiet, as if the night itself was paying attention, as if even the cold October air had stopped moving to watch what was about to happen. Frau Troffea's feet stuttered, caught, stuttered again, and then stopped. She stood completely still in the center of the courtyard for the first time in 102 days, her chest heaving, her breath coming in great ragged gasps, her arms hanging at her sides, her feet flat on the cold stone of the courtyard. Still. Conrad made a sound beside me that I cannot describe. Not a word, not a cry, something that came from so deep inside him that it had no name in any language. He was on his feet before I understood what had happened, across the courtyard in seconds, his arms around her, his face in her hair. She did not move for a long moment. Then very slowly her arms came up, found him, held him, her hands gripping the back of his coat as if she might fall if she let go. I stayed where I was. That moment was not mine. It had never been mine. It belonged entirely to the two of them and to the 102 days they had survived together and to everything that had passed between them in that time without a single word being exchanged. I looked up at the October stars, and for the first time since July, I felt something I had almost forgotten how to feel, something like hope. Frau Troffea slept for 3 days. She did not wake fully during those 3 days. She drifted in and out. She recognized Conrad. She recognized her daughters who had been brought from Strasbourg when word reached them that their mother had stopped. She drank water and broth when it was pressed to her lips. She said a few words, simple words, the names of her daughters, Conrad's name. Once she said, "I am so tired." And Conrad held her hand and said, I know you are. Rest now. You can rest now." On the fourth day she was awake, fully awake, present in her eyes in a way she had not been since July 14th. I came to see her that morning. She was sitting up in the simple bed the monks had prepared for her, thin, skeletal almost, her feet and legs bandaged where the damage from 102 days of dancing would take months to heal if it healed completely at all. Her face was gaunt. Her hair had gone partially gray in the months since July. She looked like a woman who had been somewhere very far away and had found her way back, but would carry the marks of the journey forever. She looked at me when I entered. Her eyes were clear, sharp, aware. The eyes of a woman who remembered everything. I sat beside her. I did not know what to say. In 11 years as a priest, I had never been in this particular situation. There was no doctrine for it. No prayer specifically written for a woman who had danced for 102 days and survived. She spoke first. She said, "Father Scholl, I remember all of it." I said, "All of it?" She said, "Every day, every hour. I was there the whole time. I could hear everything people said to me. I could feel Conrad holding my hand. I heard the monks praying. I heard my daughter's voices when they arrived yesterday. I was there inside it the whole time. I simply could not stop." She paused. Her hands folded in her lap, the hands of a weaver, strong hands even now, even after everything. She said, "Do you know what the worst part was, Father?" I said, "Tell me." She said, "There were moments, in the beginning, before the fear took over completely, when the rhythm felt almost like something else, almost like being carried, almost like something larger than myself moving through me. And in those first moments, before I understood what was happening, it almost felt like grace." She stopped, looked at her hands. "I think that is what made it so terrifying," she said, "that it began with something that felt almost like beauty, and then became something else entirely. And I could not remember anymore where the one ended and the other began." I sat with her for a long time after that, neither of us speaking much. The morning light coming through the small window of the monk's cell. The sounds of the shrine around us. When I left, I walked back to my room and I opened my journal and I wrote. Today I spoke with Frau Troffea. She remembers everything. She told me the worst part was that it began with something that felt almost like grace. I have been thinking about that all morning, about how the most terrible things sometimes come dressed in the clothing of something beautiful, about how hard it is to see clearly when something is using beauty as its entrance. I do not know if that is a lesson. I do not know if any of this was meant to be a lesson. I have stopped trying to find the lesson in it. I only know what I saw, and I have written it all down, so that someone after me will know that it happened, and that it was real, and that it cannot be explained, and that it was survived. The remaining dancers stopped over the following weeks. Not all of them. I need to be honest about that. 8 people among the 38 who had still been dancing on October 29th did not stop at Saverne. They were still dancing when the monks made the decision in November that they could no longer maintain care for them at the shrine. They were transported to a hospital in the city of Bern, where they were placed in the care of physicians who had agreed to monitor them. I do not know what happened to those 8 people. The records I have been able to find give no further account of them. They disappear from history at the gates of the hospital in Bern. 8 people who walked out of their ordinary lives in Strasbourg in the summer of 1518 and were still dancing when history stopped paying attention to them. I have thought about them many times in the years since. I think about them still. 8 people whose names I know, whose faces I remember, who deserved to have their story end differently, who deserved to rest. I hope they rested eventually. I have no evidence that they did, but I hope it. The death toll for the dancing plague of Strasbourg 1518 was never precisely established. Different records give different numbers. The lowest estimate is 17. The highest is more than 400. The truth is probably somewhere between those extremes. But the truth is also that the official records were not carefully kept in the chaos of those months. People died and were buried quickly. Some died in their homes and were never counted. Some died on the road during the transport to Saverne. 17 is the number I use, because those 17 have names in the records I have seen. Those 17 are documented. Those 17 were real people who had lives and families in ordinary days before July 14, 1518, and who deserve to be remembered as more than a number in a historical account. Wilhelm Strasser, blacksmith, 40 years old. He was the first to die. He collapsed in the public square on the 9th day of his dancing. The musicians kept playing. The dancers danced around him. I gave him his last rites on my knees on the cobblestones while the dancing continued. I remember each of the 17. I have written all of their names in the back of this journal. Their names and what I knew of their lives, so that they will not simply be numbers, so that they will be people. That is all I can do for them now. Remember them, name them, keep them from becoming only statistics in the account of something terrible that happened in a city once. They were people, all of them, before the dancing and during it and after it, or until they could not be people anymore. They were people and they deserved better than what happened to them. I returned to Strasbourg in November of 1518. The city was different, could not have been otherwise. You cannot have 400 people dancing in your streets for months. You cannot have 17 of them die. You cannot have the city councillors and the physicians and the priests all fail to stop it, and then expect the city to simply resume its ordinary life as if nothing had happened. The streets were quieter than they had been before July, not just because winter was coming. Something else. Something in the way people walked, in the way they looked at each other and at the streets and at the buildings they had lived among their whole lives. A wariness, a new awareness that the ordinary world could become something else without warning. That you could walk out of your front door on an ordinary morning and find yourself in the middle of something that had no name and no explanation and no cure. That awareness does not leave a city. It settles into the stones, into the way the light falls on the cobblestones in the morning, into the way people pause sometimes for no visible reason and look around them as if listening for something. Strasbourg in November 1518 was a city that had learned something it could not unlearn. The guild halls that had been turned into dancing spaces were returned to their ordinary purposes. The stage in the public square was dismantled. The musicians who had been hired to play were paid and dismissed. The cobblestones in the areas where the dancing had been heaviest were still stained. Dark patches on the gray stone. The city discussed cleaning them, replacing them, covering them somehow. In the end, they left them. I think that was right. I think a city should have to look at what happened in it, should have to walk across the evidence of its own history every day, should not be allowed to simply clean it away and pretend. I walked those streets every day of the remaining years I spent in Strasbourg. I walked across those dark patches of cobblestone and I thought about the 17, about Frau Troffea, about Conrad, about little Peter who had said mama on a cold morning at Saverne, and made me understand that even in the middle of catastrophe small moments of grace were still possible. I thought about what Frau Troffea had told me, that it began with something that felt almost like grace, and then became something else entirely. I have never stopped thinking about that. Frau Troffea returned to Strasbourg in December of 1518. She and Conrad came back together. Their daughters met them at the city gate. I was there. I watched the four of them standing together in the December cold at the eastern gate of the city. Conrad with his arms around all three of them, his daughters on either side. Frau Troffea in the center, her face thin, her hair gray, her feet in heavy bandaged boots because the damage to them would never fully heal. She would walk with a slight limp for the rest of her life, but she was walking. She looked up at the city she had lived in her whole life, at the buildings and the church spires and the winter sky above the rooftops. at the ordinary, familiar, beloved landscape of her ordinary, familiar, beloved life. And she smiled. Not a large smile. Not the smile of someone who has been relieved of something terrible and feels only joy. A complicated smile. The smile of someone who has been somewhere very dark and very far away and has come back and is not entirely sure yet what coming back means. What the ordinary world looks like now from the other side of what she has experienced. A real smile. From a real woman who had survived something incomprehensible and was standing at the gate of her city in December looking at the life that was waiting for her and deciding that she was going to walk back into it. I walked home alone that evening. I sat at my desk, opened my journal to the last page, and I wrote my final entry about the summer of 1518. I wrote this: "It is December. The dancing plague of Strasbourg has ended. I cannot say it will not return. I cannot say it will not happen somewhere else. I cannot say I understand what caused it or what stopped it or what it was. After 6 months of watching and writing and praying, I cannot offer any of those things. What I can offer is this. I watched 400 people suffer something that should not have been possible. I watched 17 of them die. I watched a man named Conrad sit beside his wife for 102 days without leaving because the alternative was unthinkable to him. I watched a 9-year-old boy say his mother's name and make an entire courtyard of monks and physicians weep with relief. I watched a city fail and try again and fail and try again and slowly, imperfectly find its way through something it could not name. I watched all of this, and I wrote it down, because if it is ever going to mean anything, it has to be remembered correctly. Not as a curiosity, not as a medical case study, not as evidence for any particular theological position, as a human thing that happened to human people, who were doing nothing wrong and deserved none of it and endured it anyway and mostly survived it and came home. That is all I know how to say about the summer of 1518. It happened, and they survived it, and that is enough." Father Benedikt Scholl continued as parish priest in Strasbourg until his death in 1541. He was 64 years old. His journal survived him and is preserved in the church archives of Strasbourg to this day. Conrad and Frau Troffea remained in Strasbourg. He rebuilt his workshop. She returned to weaving when her feet permitted it, which took more than a year. She walked with a limp for the rest of her life. They had 2 more children after 1518, both daughters. They grew old together in the city where everything had happened, where the stained cobblestones were still visible on certain streets for decades after. Frau Troffea died in 1552 at the age of 68. Conrad died 6 months later. Their daughters always said that he simply did not know how to continue once she was gone. Peter the tanner's son grew up in Strasbourg. He became a physician. He spent his career studying and writing about the dancing plague of 1518, trying to understand what had happened to him, what had happened to the city. He never found a satisfactory explanation, but he never stopped looking. Heinrich Vogler, the city councillor who had begun to dance on the morning after he sat in the empty council chamber and looked at his colleague's vacant chair. He stopped dancing at Saverne on the 22nd day. He returned to his seat on the council. He served for another 12 years. He never spoke publicly about his experience as a dancer. Not once. In 12 years of public life, he never mentioned it. His private journal, however, which was discovered after his death among his papers, contains one entry dated November 1518. One entry among years of meticulous administrative records. Says this: "I was there. I know what it felt like from the inside. I know what it is to have your body taken from you. I know what it is to want to stop more than you have ever wanted anything in your life and to be completely unable to. I know what Frau Troffea felt on every one of those 102 days. I know what all of them felt, and I will never be able to explain it, and I will never be able to forget it. And I am grateful every single morning that I wake up and my feet are still." The dancing plague of Strasbourg 1518 remains one of the most documented and least understood events in European history. Scholars have proposed many explanations in the 500 years since. Mass psychogenic illness, ergot poisoning from contaminated grain, extreme religious fervor manifesting in physical form, stress-induced trance states in a population already suffering from famine and disease. None of these explanations fully accounts for everything that was observed and recorded. The truth of what happened in Strasbourg in the summer of 1518 remains unknown. What is known is that it happened, that 431 people danced, that 17 of them died dancing, that the rest eventually stopped, that a man named Conrad held his wife's hand for 102 days without leaving, that a 9-year-old boy said his mother's name on a cold morning in Saverne, that a woman named Frau Troffea walked back through the eastern gate of Strasbourg in December and smiled a complicated real human smile at the city that was waiting for her. What is known is that ordinary people endured something extraordinary and came home. This has been the dancing plague, the true story of Strasbourg 1518, narrated from the journal of Father Benedikt Scholl. If the story moved you tonight, if it made you think about the people behind history's strangest events, if it reminded you that behind every documented fact there is a human being who lived through it, then it has done what it was meant to do. This has been Grey Archive Tales. Subscribe and stay in the shadows. We will be here, waiting.